All right, well, I think everybody is in now. I'd like to thank, of course, everyone for joining us for Beer with the Mayor, at least this online virtual version of it. I was hoping to be downtown at an actual place where at least I could have a beer, but there was live music or whatever, so I'm here at City Hall with just water. But hopefully you all are able to at least try out your favorite beer while we're having this event. And hopefully we can get together live pretty soon. It seems like things are getting better as far as the pandemic goes. On that score, before I move on to other things, we definitely have seen some improvement in the last few weeks. We currently have about 125 active cases, meaning diagnosed COVID-19 cases in Nashua. We are running a positivity rate of about 5%, which is higher than we'd want. This means that of all the people that get tested in a day, and between over 300 are being tested every day, about 5% come up positive. In other words, they test that they have COVID-19. And also we have a few outbreaks, but the numbers are getting better. They're going down. And so we're optimistic that as more people get vaccinated, we will see a further decline in the number of COVID-19 infections. Right now, about 48% of Nashua adults have been vaccinated at least once. About 35% are fully vaccinated. So we are beginning to, get a accumulation of people that have been vaccinated. Our public health department, of course, continues to run clinics for both testing and vaccinations. They have vaccinated over 15,000, administered over 15,000 doses. And I have to say they're doing a very good job. They do, like over this weekend, a couple of our public health nurses visited for a few places, but one was they stopped at Greeley Park and there was a barbecue going on. And they asked the people there, well, have you been vaccinated? And the people had not. And so they talked with them for a little while, and most of the people agreed, okay, I'll get vaccinated. And so they reached people that probably wouldn't have otherwise been reached or persuaded to go to a clinic or something like that. So public health is always out doing things like that. They went to other locations over the weekend. So we are seeing, again, some light at the end of the tunnel. One of the big things that's going on now, and what I usually do is, of course, I give you a brief description of some of the things that are going on, and then we move on to questions, some prepared and some from you live, some given to us in advance. But I would like to recognize some of the people who are on today. First, we have Alderwoman Trish Klee from Ward 3. We have Alderman Ernie Jetty from Ward 5. I don't see his camera on, but I think he is on the call. And we have Andrew Sonoda, who's the chair of the Cable TV Advisory Board and who's going to tell us a little bit more about the cable licensing process when we get to that. I don't see any other members of the Board of Aldermen on, but I'm not sure I have everybody's photo. So if someone else is on, you should let us know and I will definitely introduce you. Well, the city budget is now going to be the main city business for the next 6 weeks or so. I proposed a budget which totals $290 million. And I'd like to say this right at the beginning, whenever I talk about the budget. If it were not for the actions of the state of New Hampshire, and I will briefly mention what those are, the city tax rate this year, this coming fall, would either be flat or go down because we have instituted some very tight measures. If it were not for the state, the city tax rate would be flat or going down. Now, what they have hit us with, and they've hit us very hard, is a $4.4 million increase in our pension bill. The city is a member, was induced to join the state pension system many decades ago. This has nothing to do with an increase in wages, nothing to do with an increase in wages. You can get that directly from the pension system. 80% of the money we're paying in is to build up their cash reserves. A reduction or a insufficient amount of reserves was caused by mismanagement at the state level, but they are making us pay for it. So a $4.4 million increase there. That's a 2% tax increase before we even get to anything else. Number two, the state is reducing school aid by over $7 million from current year. So when you put those two things together, 7 million, 4 million, make all that up with city dollars, that's a 5% tax increase. Now, we have been able to offset that in a couple of ways. Number one, we are getting some rescue from the American Rescue Plan. We think we'll be able to replace some of the lost revenue from the state of New Hampshire as a result of the aid which is coming from Washington. The city will get around $8 million a year for 2 years. Some of that we can use to offset some of the lost revenue. The other thing we've done is impose really tight budget guidelines. I asked all departments to come in at 0%, except for one, which I will mention. Most of the departments, or many of them, did a really good job with this. I asked City Hall to come in at 0 at the most, 0% increase. And in fact, the City Hall departments got together and you will see a 2.7% decrease, 2.7% lower on the City Hall budget next year than the current year. Public Works is about 1.8 or 1.9% lower than current year. The library is about 1.8 or 1.9% lower than the current year. Now, we also asked this of the fire and police departments. Those budgets have been up considerably over the last 6 years. Fire has been up 27% over the last 6 years. They did not feel that they wanted to cooperate in our efforts to try to help the city taxpayers. So fire came in with a 4% request, police closer to 3%. Even though, in a way I wanted to just propose 0% as I'd asked them to do, I have proposed a compromise with each of those departments. So what I've done is I proposed for each a 1.7% increase. 1.7% equals the CPI, or the cost of living increase, average over the last 3 years. We'll see what happens there. School department, because of the disruption caused by the online learning and of course the COVID-19 pandemic, I was concerned that we make sure that they can meet the needs of our students, some of which have not been connected with the online learning fully or at all. So there I asked for a 1.5% increase, and they came very close to that. So that gives you an overview. One area that we have done particularly well with in terms of reducing costs, and Kim Kleiner is on here, the person who's largely responsible, is that we developed a new HMO plan, which we are asking to all employee groups to adopt. It increases some deductibles, but it saves money for the city and for employees on their weekly paychecks, less deductions for on the weekly paychecks. That is helping us save, and that's been adopted in a number of employee groups so far, in City Hall, at Public Works, at the library, and that is helping us save in those areas. So that's part of the reason we're able to reduce costs so significantly on City Hall and Public Works, the library, et cetera. So that's been very, very helpful. So we know that the hardworking taxpayers of Nashua don't want to and can't really afford big tax increases right now. We know that the pandemic is here. Things would be a lot better if it were not for the state of New Hampshire. They're using us as a cash register, as they've been doing for decades. I could give you more of the details on that if you wanted, but they are using us as a cash register again. So unfortunately, I think the taxes, despite our efforts, despite cutting budgets here, will probably be up, in the three, maybe, in the 3 to 4% range. Again, were it not for the state, that rate would be lower or flat. Now, there's some other things going on that I would like to just touch on. We are the city through the Cable TV Advisory Board. Now, Andrew Sonoda is the chair of that. He's going to tell you a little bit about what's going on. There's a relicense procedure going on there. City has limited discretion when it comes to cable TV because of federal laws which protect the cable companies. The city cannot regulate prices or anything like that. We cannot limit the amount that they charge to consumers. Andrew can detail that, but we have a few things we can ask, and Andrew can tell you about that. But there's an entire committee of people who are negotiating that, who are involved in those negotiations. This is his third time around. And finally, there's one thing I hope you will check out, and that is the city master plan. We're going through a master planning exercise that looks at the future of the city. We ask you to it's called Imagine Nashua 20. Imagine Nashua. We're asking you to look to the future and help us imagine the way we would like the city to evolve, particularly in the areas that we know are likely to see changes over the next years or decade. And those, of course, downtown, some of our commercial corridors, possibly Daniel Webster College. Many of the residential neighborhoods, of course, will remain as they are, and there'll be no recommended changes. But in these more areas where we're likely to see more change, we're asking you to really get involved, get on the website, get on the virtual meetings, and you can make comments online. Help us direct the future of our city. And before I go on to Andrew, I just want to mention that, despite the budget crunch that we're facing, we are still making a number of improvements for our residents. We are continuing our paving plan of action. By the end of this year, we will have paved 120 miles of streets around the city out of the 300 that we have. We are implementing the Riverfront Master Plan, which was adopted several years ago and which will really enhance the beauty of our river for all of our residents. And we are undertaking the middle school improvement project, middle school improvement that has already expanded Fairgrounds and updated it with state-of-the-art technology and with solar power, now moving on to Pennachuck and eventually a new school to replace Elm Street. So we're moving forward on all those fronts. I'm also proposing in the capital improvement section of the budget that we purchase for the police department body cameras for the first time. They've requested this over the last few months. Many police departments have body cameras. Seems to be the best way to go, and we want to join those other communities. Now, I think we should. Now, I saw that Linda Harriet Gathright, Alderwoman Linda Harriet Gathright, is on the call from Ward 9. Thank you, Linda, for joining us. We still have Ernie, and I know Trish. I don't see any other members of the Board of Aldermen. Again, if you are on there, please speak up. But why don't I turn it over to Andrew, who can brief you a little bit on just the way the cable TV franchise agreement works and what the city is attempting to negotiate. And Andrew is on mute, so he's got to remember to unmute himself.
You'd think by now we'd all remember to unmute every time we had to talk, but I still get caught up. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for inviting me to speak. So a franchise agreement is an agreement with a cable provider and a franchise authority, in this case, the city of Nashua. And it's governed by federal statute that was first written in the 1980s, so it's a bit dated. And the statute really was put in place to make sure that the cable providers basically had the financial wherewithal to be able to perform and to provide television access to residents of the cities that were being covered by the franchise. And so the core of our process is to make sure that the city's needs are being met by Comcast as part of that renewal process. So a little bit of context, the reason that the city is the franchise authority is because Comcast, even though they own their wires, they're using the city right-of-ways to bring those wires to the citizens to provide the cable services. So as part of that, the federal statute allows the city to charge a franchise fee. The franchise fee is capped at up to 5%. The city currently is at 4%. A lot of people will say, well, why don't you charge the full 5%? Basically, that's a direct pass through to the cable subscribers. It's charged on the basis of the television part of the bill. So even though the Comcast provides other services, telephonic services and internet services, the only part of the Comcast bill that's subject to the franchise fee is the television component. Similarly, the things that as part of the franchise agreement negotiations we can talk about are the television component. So it's, or I should say, that we have authority to deal with are the television component. We can certainly ask questions, and this is a good time to do that because we have interaction with Comcast in a more direct way than we would ordinarily do. But as far as internet, which is becoming a much more important, I think, for a lot of our citizens, that's not a direct feature of the agreement. So what do we do with the franchise fee? So the bulk of the franchise fee goes to the city and is part of the general fund. There is a portion of the bill, or the franchise fee, that gets put into a special revenue account that's dedicated to the provision of public education and government access networks. So channels, so channels 16, 99, and 96 are paid for out of that fee. We also use that money, in addition to those operating expenses, to provide for the technology in, for instance, the Aldermanic Chamber and the other meeting rooms around the city, so that we have increased access for the citizens to be able to engage with city government and watch city meetings in progress. And my understanding is that this, even though it's not going to be live, is also going to be broadcast. So those are some of the things that we use that money for. So this process is really assessing what the city needs are for cable television, seeing if those needs are being met under the current contract, and then determining what needs to be done, either changes to the provisions of Comcast's side of the agreement, or if there needs to be an adjustment in the franchise fee to provide for that. So that's basically what our whole process at this point is.
But the city doesn't have the right to regulate prices. I mean, that's what most people.
Exactly. The things that we can't do are prices, what channels are covered, what content's provided on channels. Basically, most of the things that people really care about are not directly covered by the discussion.
Now, Alderman Ernie Jetty is part of the Cable TV Advisory Board as well. I don't know, I believe Ernie is on here. Ernie, do you have anything that you would like to add to Andrew's? I don't hear anything. And did I see Trish Clee's hand up?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor. It's,
Ernie, yes.
Ernie Jetty.
There's Ernie.
Yeah. So I would, I know that a lot of people are complaining about, lack of competition to Comcast. And, again, that's something that we don't have any control over. And I think a lot of people misunderstand, this franchise agreement is not an exclusive thing. It's not we're not granting Comcast a monopoly. Any internet provider can come in and compete with Comcast. The difficulty they face, of course, is that, as you pointed out, the wires that Comcast and its predecessor, have strung through the city belong to them. And, a competitor would either have to lay its own wires or rent space on the wires that Comcast has. So it's kind of difficult for a competitor to try to come in. But the city, does not exclude any of those competitors. They're all welcome. We've done nothing to prevent anyone from coming in. But it's a matter of the marketplace has not been sufficient to attract many competitors. I think Fairpoint is the only competitor that I'm aware of, but the city has done nothing to prevent anyone else from coming in. So this franchise agreement is limited, as Mr. Sanada has pointed out, is limited to the cable TV portion. And, the only control we have over is trying to get Comcast to provide us, more channels for the city to broadcast on for, government sports, local high school sports, for example, that type of thing. So, but thank you for giving me the opportunity to add some clarification.
Well, thank you for your help with all that. I know that Consolidated provides cable or fiber competition in some parts of the city, and that may be expanding in the next year or so. We'll have to get more news on Consolidated's plans, but the fiber cable that goes to the houses in some part of the city, that may be expanded and give more residents a better choice between at least two providers. Now, does anybody have any questions they would like? Well, one thing I wanted to add is that there is a survey on the website, nashua.nh.gov, regarding this Comcast renewal. And anybody who wants to make comments or has things they would like our Cable TV Advisory Board to try to pursue, you can simply go on the website and make comments there. Now, I'm going to go to, well, if anybody has questions regarding this Comcast issue, you certainly are welcome to ask them now.
Mayor,
yes, who else?
This is Steve Dixon.
Steve, yes, go ahead.
And it sounds to me, so since we're getting this, I don't know how much the money is, but it sounds like that we're being paid to stay with Comcast. So if they took that money away, would there be more competition? If they decided, okay, no more money, would that take away the would that bring more competition, like for Spectrum, or from yeah, fair enough. Thank you.
If the city were not to charge the franchise fee, is that what you mean?
Right. Yeah. It sounds like that's a payoff to keep their monopoly. With all due respect, and I'm a newbie. With all due respect.
Well, I think now this has been in place for a long time, so It's it's basically a tax that the city would put on any, or an add-on that the city, would put on any provider. But Andrew, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes. As the mayor said, it's effectively a tax. It's a separate line item on the bill. So the customers actually see that that's an add-on that the city is charging them. And under the agreement, basically the only effect on competition is that any company that enters the marketplace in Nashua gets the same agreement. So we're negotiating with Comcast, but if another competitor came in and wanted to provide cable television in the city, if they agreed to the same contract, there would be nothing prohibiting them from operating under that. The big expense is what Alderman Jettie pointed out, and that basically to provide cable television, you have a very expensive infrastructure. Originally copper and now copper, hybrid of copper and fiber optic going around the city. And that would be millions and millions of dollars to construct a parallel system. And that's the big barrier to entry for competition. Right now, Comcast, because they bought the predecessor companies that built it up from scratch in the 80s, they already have the infrastructure there. So someone that was coming in that was new, and I'd certainly, I think I'm like everyone else here that I'd like other options. The barrier isn't the 4% that that all the competitors would see as an add-on to their bill. It's really the millions of dollars that they'd have to invest in infrastructure before they could get up and running to have subscribers.
So if we charge them more money, would everyone get better channels?
No.
Fair enough. Okay.
As I say, this is just a tax.
Go to 5%. The law allows us to go to 5%, but all that means is you'd have to pay more and it would come to the city. So this 4% has been fixed for decades, really. It is used, as you've already heard, to provide some service to this. All of the cable access costs are covered. People who run the studio out on Riverside Drive, that's all covered by the franchise tax. The people who have their individual shows out there, technology that is used to broadcast the meetings, both at the school department, in the city hall, all of that is paid for by this particular source of revenue. So there are some services that come back.
You're basically charging the residents for those services.
Yes, you as a cable TV provider, a subscriber, pay 4% on top of your bill for cable only, not for internet or phone or anything else.
Okay, I have a question.
Yes, George.
So we pay money to Comcast to allow them to do business in our city.
Well, you, the subscriber, pay for the content that they deliver to your house.
Okay,
And
but the 4%.
the 4%, the 4% goes to the city government, and much of that is used to pay for various services that residents get. All the access, the meetings that are broadcast, the labor that it takes to record those meetings, and everything that happens with respect to the public access function, technology, labor, everything, studio, all that is paid for out of that franchise amount.
But it's paid to Comcast.
No, it comes to the city.
And what is that? And the city disperses it to
the uses that I mentioned.
Okay.
What the city pays for Channel 99, Channel 16. There's a broadcast studio out at Riverside Drive.
Yep.
There are people who work at the studio that help those who have their individual shows, help them broadcast their shows. There are people who work during all of the public meetings to broadcast the meetings. All of that gets paid for out of the 4%.
It's basically a tax that 95% of us are paying for 1% use.
Right.
That's
My last question would be, are we given a choice as to whether we want to support that or not?
no, it's it's been in place for a long time, but it's another source of revenue for the city. Now, the city always has the option of increasing it, but we've never proposed doing that. It's been at the 4% for a long, long time. Now, remember that to the extent it doesn't pay, there is some excess revenue that goes over and above the costs of those services I mentioned. That helps offset the tax rate. So, it's not a huge amount of money, but your taxes are a little bit lower, property tax wise, as a result of the revenue that's generated from that particular source.
But I guess in the overall picture, because we're paying the 4%, the tax rate isn't lower. It might be on the property taxes, but it's coming from another avenue.
Correct. It
So
comes
it's
from
not-
the cable TV users.
Okay. I guess you can call it what you want, but it's still there.
It's definitely there.
All right.
So if I don't use Comcast, I'm Steve D again. If I don't use Comcast, because I don't use Comcast because they're not a very good company, I DirecTV and landline, I'm still paying that tax without getting any use from it.
No, you're not. No, you're not paying it. If you don't use the Comcast cable service, you're not paying it.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Okay. So
You
there's
do
your
not pay it on-
choice.
Wait, you do not pay it on internet and you do not pay it on phone. It's only on the cable TV content portion of the bill. So if you've disconnected from Comcast, you do not pay anything.
Okay.
Thank you.
What- Trish had a question or comment. Trish Khalid.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the questions was already answered, and that was the discussion of you that 4% is being paid by the subscribers. And you've answered the question that it's only on the cable TV portion of the Comcast bill. So if they don't have cable TV, but they have phone and internet, they're not paying that. And this fee, if I'm not mistaken, is the fee is charged because of the use of the wires that are going through the public right away. Is that correct?
Yes. So the city right of way is being used to provide the service.
Okay, so because of that, so if a second cable company were to come through and were to lay their own lines, et cetera, there too, if I understood Mr. Coronado correctly, they too would be subject to this 4% fee because again, their wires are going through the public's right away. I know it's being passed through these cable companies to the subscribers, but that's just one of the ways that it's being paid for, and that this does cover all of the city's expenses as far as our video services of the Board of Aldermen meeting, the Board of Ed meetings, et cetera. I just want to make sure I have this entire picture correct.
Yes, that's what pays
So-
for all of that public access.
One more quick comment or question. This is actually a question. I know of Consolidated, and I'm sorry I don't quite understand what they provide. Do they provide cable TV, or are they also just providing the internet service? So I know they laid fiber optics.
They provide just internet via fiber. So a portion of the city is served by Consolidated and for internet. And that portion of the city also has Comcast for internet. So in a portion of the city, there's some competition.
Consolidated does have a TV service that they provide over the internet.
Okay, an internet, but not a cable. But that's
Well, I
different.
mean, at that point, I mean, it's delivered over a wire that runs alongside the Comcast wire.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fiber service. That's only on their fiber service.
All right.
That
now-
was,
But the cable, excuse me, the internet service may be expanded by Consolidated. We're waiting to hear for their plans. But I think we should move on just because there are a lot of other questions and we're trying to, give this, we don't want to keep you here too long. Let me answer 2 or 3 questions very quickly and then we'll get your verbal questions. From Albee, we get the questions about recycling. How's that being handled? So China got out of the business of accepting the recycled materials. So at that point, which was a couple of years ago, the price that the city has to pay to dispose of recycled materials escalated 100 times. So we were paying about less than $1 a ton to dispose of the single stream recycling. After that, it jumped to $85 a ton. Now that's what we pay to and that's put out to bid. That's what we pay to a contractor to take the recycled materials. And they are going to Southeast Asia, but not to China. But it's sort of leveled off. Jumped up to 85 and it's been there for a couple of years. That's the basic picture. Fluctuates a little bit, but another question is masks. The Board of Health is meeting tomorrow to consider the mask protocols that the city has put in place, and they'll be making a recommendation to the Board of Aldermen. I expect they're going to recommend some changes based upon CDC and state guidelines that have come out recently. CDC is saying that people who are fully vaccinated don't need to wear masks inside. Although the state has lifted its mandate, if you look at what they actually say on their health website, their restrictions are far more severe than the CDC. They're saying that unless everybody in the environment is vaccinated, that everybody has to wear a mask. That's what their actual guidance says. So, they're kind of talking out of both sides of their mouth. But we'll see what the Board of Health, and you can tune into that meeting. It's at 12:30 tomorrow if you're very interested.
Mayor, with all due, what do you? That was my question. With all due respect, and what is the? So you can use the city guidelines to lift the mask. I mean, I'm just trying to figure out how are you going to? Are you the one that's going to lift the mask, or is there somebody else that's going to lift the mask?
No, well,
that's the question, basically.
This is
With
an
all due
ordinance.
respect.
This is an ordinance, and Steve, you asked, but so did a couple other people. This is an ordinance passed by the Board of Aldermen. So the way that the ordinance came into effect is that the local Board of Health, which is 3 doctors, they recommended to the Board of Aldermen that these mask protocols be put in place. Board of Aldermen followed their recommendation and enacted those protocols. Now, to change the rules, the Board of Aldermen would need to amend or eliminate the ordinance that's on the books. And the Board of Health is meeting tomorrow to consider what to recommend to the Board of Aldermen. And I'm not, I think the discussion, there's some disagreement, I think, among the 3 doctors, but I would be very surprised if they do not recommend an amendment to the ordinance. And it could be that that following CDC guidelines, the people who are fully vaccinated do not need to wear masks in any indoor setting.
That's fine. That's fine. Thank you. It's fine.
Now, the Board of Aldermen can follow the recommendation, but doesn't have to. They could go further or they could go not as far. So I think we'll find out a lot more tomorrow.
Thank you for that answer. Thank you very much.
Well, I got a question from Steve. The Performing Arts Center is it going to drive up the tax rate? And the answer is basically no. I mean, the people have a misconception sometimes about how important these capital projects are to the city tax rate. Of all the city projects that have been bonded, that means we've gotten borrowed money and paid for them. All of the principal and interest on all projects, those include city, those include school, everything. The budget for paying off principal and interest in the current year is $16.8 million. Now that's out of a $290 million budget. So all of the projects, all the schools, all of the city projects, everything that's been done, except for the sewers, which is handled by the sewer, all of that money, it equals $16.8 million. Now, because we pay off principal every year, when we borrow additional money, the budget for principal and interest can remain about the same. For example, next year in the budget that I have proposed, the amount of bonded indebtedness budget, principal and interest, including the Performing Arts Center, will go up about 0.1%, $28,000 on 16 million. So it's not having a big impact on the tax rate. Number two, it will pay for itself. I mean, one project that we attracted as a result of the Performing Arts Center is housing on School Street, which when constructed, and that's been approved, will pay about $400,000 a year in taxes. So in the end, you know, we're confident that the Performing Arts Center will attract enough private investment that it will cover the cost. But even if that were not the case, the principal and interest on that, which is just one of, you know, dozens and dozens of projects, is you know, not great, a great percentage of for all of this together, not a great percentage of the budget. So our goal is to kind of hold that capital improvement budget flat or just increasing a little bit when we consider all of the projects together. Now, when this 110 or $818 million school project comes online, some of the borrowing has been done on that, but not a lot of it. You know, that will be hard to work that into the schedule without seeing an increase in the capital improvements budget. But, you know, we'll do our best to handle that project in the same way. Now, why don't we go to live questions? Anybody who has a question can just go ahead and answer it.
Mr. Mayor.
Ask it. Yes.
Mr. Mayor. Hi, John Marshall.
Hi, John.
Going back to our city finances, you went over the budget, which you proposed. Looking for some positive stuff here, particularly on the revenue side. What opportunities, projects, initiatives may be coming online that will help on the revenue side? For example, residential projects coming online that would increase the tax base, or initiatives that your city's doing to increase our commercial base.
Yeah. So, for example, there are certainly residential projects that are coming on that will increase the tax base, and we're always looking for that. So we've got 150 units coming on School Street. That could be as much as a 50 amount of private investment. There are another 150 units being built on, they're going to be built on Canal Street. That is, you know, going to be tens of millions of dollars of private investment as well. We are working with a group of, you know, private investors to provide a new location for Costco down at the end of the Spitbrook Road east, so to speak. And that will be tens of millions of dollars of private investment. Now, so we're always looking to expand the tax base. And that's very important that we do so because we can bring new revenue in. keep in mind that the state, it's just hard to communicate how big a factor of city finances, what the state has done year after year, chipping away year after year. I could go on for the rest of the call about this, but I just mentioned what they've hit us with this year. Another example, I'm just going to throw out one or two quick examples. There is something called the rooms and meals tax. You pay that every time you go to a restaurant or a hotel. Now that was passed to substitute for some municipal taxes. And when that was passed years ago, the promise was, well, don't worry, 40% of that revenue will always go to the cities and towns. That was the deal. Except when the state needed money, they went to the cash register and they froze that. So the amount, even though the amount of that revenue has gone up and up and up and up, we no longer get 40%. The cities and towns get the same amount as like 10 years ago, and they freeze it every year. When they need that money, they take it out of the cash register. Another thing is there's a thing called revenue sharing, which was another statewide thing where the cities and towns were supposed to get a certain percentage. That was passed decades ago. That's been frozen. They went to that cash register. They went to the cash register again. They're raising the pension costs. They got us into the state pension system by saying they would pay 35% of all municipal pension costs. When they needed money, they went to that cash register again, and they reduced that from 35% to 0, even after they mismanaged the system. So 80% of the money we're paying in right now that has nothing to do with, and you get this from the pension system, 80% of the money that we're getting right now is going to build up the assets at the state level. That broken promise, the 35%, has cost by next year will have cost the national taxpayers $84 million. 84 million. So that's not a year, that's a cumulative total. So I don't want to go on with that too long, but we are trying to increase the tax base. But every year the state hits us with something, and it makes it more difficult to increase revenues. Or even if we increase them, we have to give it to the state of New Hampshire. Anybody else? Now I see Terry Robinson.
Yes, hi, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, kind of following up to a prior question about increasing our revenue base within the city. You mentioned a couple of good construction projects to build housing. Are there other initiatives underway to attract industry and grow jobs?
Certainly there are, but easier said than done in the sense that the biggest, well, for example, BAE has done some significant improvements down in the south end that increased the tax base. But yes, we are trying to attract jobs and industry. But the biggest complaint that businesses articulate in terms of the business climate here is not enough employees. We cannot find employees. That goes from restaurants, which are really, really understaffed right now, to places, to high-tech businesses. Across the board, can't get enough employees. So I think that's an obstacle to attracting more, attracting newer businesses, because they look at that and they see it's, number two, how the lack of housing is an obstacle. So we are attempting to preserve land for industrial development so that when job growth, and the number of jobs has been growing, but no big employers, smaller employers, a uniform company over on Simon Street employing 150 people, things like that have happened. There's a medical supply company down in the Mill Yard that has been growing quickly, and the city's been very supportive of that. But we want to preserve industrially zoned land. Now, we get pressure from developers who own this land to allow housing development because they say, well, that's where the demand is. You know, forget industry. We want to build housing. That's where we know we can make a profit. So we do need housing, but down at the Flatley development down in the South End, Gateway Hills, we're trying to preserve industrial land there, also over on Simon Street. So we're always looking for that. But you know, right now, the big demand is in the housing area. John Vins has a question. Who is they in the state? Well, it's basically the state legislature now and the governor. These things get proposed in the state budgets. Now, I have to say, I don't want you to blanket blame all members of the legislature because our delegation, Nashua's delegation, has been very supportive of trying to help cities and towns across New Hampshire. For example, members of our legislative delegation sponsored legislation not to go back to the 35% that the state was supposed to pay to all cities and towns for these pension costs, to go to 5% was one bill, 15% to another. Both those bills apparently are going to fail in the legislature. You know, I hate to say it, but there's a partisan edge to it. These tend to be party line votes, and the Republicans have a majority. The bill, there's a bill to, this is a little more complicated, but there's a temporary decline in school free and reduced lunch qualifiers because there's no incentive for families to do the paperwork anymore because lunches are all free. So there are more free and reduced lunch kids, in other words, lower income families, but the number who have qualified is lower, not higher, because all the families haven't filled out the paperwork. So we're losing a couple of $1 million because of that. There's a bill, for example, to equalize that, to take care of that temporary problem. Looks like that's going to fail. Again, that would be for all cities and towns. Looks like it's going to fail. You know, I could go on at a little more length, but I won't. But it's the legislature. Our delegation is trying to correct these things, but they need to get a majority, and the majority is not there at the present time. Trish, you want to add anything to that?
No, not really. I agree with exactly what you say. All of these elements are going to die. I hate to say it. They were brought in from Senator Rosenwald, from Representative O'Brien. We fought the good fight, but they failed in committee. So they will just die on the floor of the House when they get there.
I mean, I want you to know that Nashua is not the only community that's complaining about this.
No, Manchester is being hurt too really hard also. Yeah.
One sort of very interesting outgrowth of COVID and the virtual environment is that previously in the former world, it was very difficult for me and the other mayors of New Hampshire to meet because we tried to meet live, and there's the Paul Grenier from Berlin, and Joyce Craig from Manchester, and Mayor Lovett from Claremont, et cetera. It's hard to get together, but as a result of the virtual environment, we're meeting like regularly now, every 2 weeks for an hour and a half. And we have written we as a group, 13 mayors have written, Republicans and Democrats have written mayor letters to the legislature, to the governor. What about this pension problem? We're all getting really slammed. What about this loss in school aid? This is an artificial drop in the number of free and reduced lunch kids. We don't even get answers. We wrote to the governor, no answer. We wrote to the president of the Senate and other members of the kind of Senate majority, no answer. So I heard the president of the Senate was asked he was meeting with our chamber, was asked about this pension issue. He said, oh, that's because, because of municipal wages have gone up so much. No, wait, you either aren't listening or something, because the pension people themselves tell you this has nothing to do with increase in wages. It has to do with the fact that you're recapitalizing the system, and 80% of the money coming in is being charged to do that. So we ask, why is it so important to collect as much money as you are? There's a goal to go to 100% funded. It's about 65. And we said, well, okay, what if we try to get it to 80? I mean, the state's never going to end. So there's never going to be a lack of money to pay the bills. I mean, we could talk about the pension system in some detail, but no one's listening. I mean, not no one, but the people who run the show are not listening. Sorry for the gripes, but this is what, the pension bill, $30 million. That's 15% of that's 15% of your tax bill. 15%. So for someone who pays $7,000, $1,000 is going to the state pension system. It's a lot of money.
Mr. Mayor, I have to agree with you. It's very, very frustrating as a legislator, et cetera, to understand why they want to do this, because most industries, they'll only fund 80 to 85%. No one funds 100% of the pension unless ultimately the goal is to kill the pension plan. That's the only thing that I can truly think of. And I've not spoken to anybody, so I don't want to put an ulterior motive to it, but it doesn't sound right that we have to go to 100%. They did mismanage it, went down to 35% was all that was funded. So I understand they have to get it up, but 80% would be more than enough. They don't have to do that.
As you can see, this is a great frustration among for municipal officials, mayors, city council members, board of aldermen members, and I could go on, but I won't. So I'm going to go to another question. I think Terry asked the question about trying to increase jobs. One thing that we're pushing very hard for that we think would result in not only increased real estate values, but also jobs is commuter rail. Now, if you talk to big small businesses, they will tell you, that this would be a big amenity in trying to attract younger, very qualified people to this, young people to this area, that it could do nothing but, you talk to, at least they don't really have official positions exactly, but you talk to anyone from Fidelity, from BAE, any of these big businesses or smaller ones. Rail would do a lot. So we are, we are in the midst now of the final planning phase of the Capital Corridor Rail project at the state level. It will take some time for that to be completed, another year or a little more. Our delegation pushed very hard for that, and there was a lot of machinations up in Concord about it, but that is going ahead right now. So that is another area that we know we can, if we're successful in getting commuter rail, that it will have a big economic benefit. Now, we try to finish by 7 so that you might come back. You're not bored by all this online internet stuff. One person says, yeah, you've heard of commuter rail for 20 years since I moved to Nashua. Yeah, that's true. We've been fighting for it for 20 years. I was mayor before we were trying to get it. But there's more progress in the last 5 or 6 years than there's ever been. So no guarantees, but at least the project is moving to a place where the state could actually make a decision to go ahead or not and qualify for federal support. So why don't we take one more question? I don't see anything, but how about John? How about John Vins? Do you have a question? You got to go on. unmute if you want to ask it.
I hit the wrong button. Yes, I was curious what the status is. You had put out an email a while back about the police commission and maybe trying to reform that. I was wondering if there's any status or if that got dropped or if we're plugging ahead on that.
So the idea is, well, Nashua is the only city in the state or only community that does not make local appointments to the police department or the police commission. So it used to be that there were a number of cities in New Hampshire, Portsmouth, Manchester, Laconia, and others, where the state made the appointments to the police commission. Those communities have all moved to local appointments. Nashua is the only one left where the state makes the appointment. So I put out the question, what do you think? Should there be local appointments, more local control? And I got quite a few answers. There's only been another question I asked on this survey was, there's only been one woman on the National Police Commission in 130 years. Are really the most qualified, are qualified people really being considered? It's a very kind of secretive process. The governor makes the appointments, and you don't really know who, why. So I put out that little survey, and it was interesting because opinion was definitely divided on the issue of whether there should be a minimum number of women. There's currently a 3-member police commission. Should at least one woman be? And it came back mixed. People said, look, some people said yes, but some people said, look, just get the most qualified person, which, how can you disagree with that? It's just, you wonder with this record if all the qualified people are being considered. But on the other question, should there be local appointments? It came back very one-sided in favor of local appointments. So I and some other aldermen moved forward with a proposal. Now this would need to be enacted by the people. The aldermen cannot make a change by themselves. All they can do is put to you, the voters, do you want local appointments or do you want state appointments? So because it is a provision of the charter, the charter can only be amended with a popular vote. So some of the aldermen and I, including Trish and Linda and some others, have proposed to the Board of Aldermen that they vote to put on the ballot the question, do you want local control or not? We think the people should be allowed to make that decision. I think there would be advantages to certainly the local appointments. We would know the people better. We've also proposed that it go to 5 people. I think there should be much better transparency, much better public access. The police commission's the only commission really that, at least the ones that I appoint or deal with, that doesn't meet in City Hall. You have to go, you have to go to the police station, go through the vetting, go through the through the bulletproof glass, get approved, go upstairs. Why not in the City Hall? Why do you have to go through that to be able to attend? No virtual meetings, unlike all the other commissions. I mean, I just think that if we had more local input, the budgeting would be better, to be honest. There would just be, more citizen and community cooperation and oversight. So, but all we're proposing is that the people be allowed to decide. If the people say they want to leave the system the way it is, fine. But people should be able to, we think, look at the question after 130 years and make the decision. Now, we are at 7:06. My helpers here are telling me I should definitely end. So we do have a coffee with the mayor tomorrow morning. If you'd like to get on again, 8 o'clock. Same, we can help for those we know that the sign-up procedure was not perfect this time. We'll make it better next time. I look forward to seeing you again. Thank you for all of your interest in the community. Thank you, Andrew, Trish, Linda, Ernie, everybody who's been on the call. We will definitely be, we'll be doing this again, hopefully live. And if you want to ask some more questions, you can come on to the coffee with the mayor tomorrow at 8 o'clock in the morning. So thank you very much.